there are groups that are literally making it their entire job and purpose to harm trans people. And it's gross, and it's disgusting, and it's painful to think about, because if you've got anybody in your life who is trans, who means a lot to you, then it's probably very hard to not envision them when you're going over this data. Guys, if I said the words 2,600 emails, what comes to mind to you? Well, I know there's probably some person in my chat that's like, Hillary's emails have been leaked. They finally did it. No, we're not doing that. We're not doing that. Somebody. Yep, there's people who are automatically doing the Hillary's emails thing. No. So, there were 2,600 emails leaked from a secret working group that helped push anti-trans laws across the country. We're going to go over them when Gigi is done pressing on me. Stop, Gigi. I love you, but I have to talk about work now. That is my head. That is my head. All right. Let's get to the fan art section, and then we can get into everything else. First bit of fan art we have today is from Sideshow Kaz. Our great Lord Dumpy protecting Growlithe Suris and Ocean Cat Girl as they lead us into a path of truth and reason. Ocean, you have been cat girlified, and I am apparently been dog girlified, specifically Growlithe dog girlified. I don't know how to feel about this, but Lord Dumpy as I'm gonna get to the next one. This one's from Call Me Queer. 2 versions of Hole-chan, sort of anime style and one in weird core style. Really like how the second one came out. So here's Hole-chan, and here is Hole-chan. Soul Tadpole says, uh-oh, time for the curse shower thought of the day. Back in the day, Trick cereal had shapes, and now they're just puffs of cereal. What if the reason we can't see the shapes anymore is because Tricks are for kids? Soul Tadpole, I still see the shapes. I think I'm broken, actually. I need therapy about that. Welcome to the chat. Guys, thank you so much for the fan art submissions. If you want your fan art to be shown in a future video, the best way to do so is to drop it into the fan art section of the Discord. With that said, let's go ahead and get to the topic at hand after you hit the like button and the subscribe button over on YouTube. That said, let's go ahead and get into today's topic. It's the exact words I said earlier at the beginning of the stream. It's those ones. On a Saturday afternoon, on August 2019, South Dakota Republican State Representative Fred Deutsch sent an email to 18 anti-trans activists, doctors, and lawyers with the text of a bill he planned to introduce that would make it a felony for doctors to give transgender children under 16 gender-affirming care. I have no doubt that this will be an uphill battle when we get to session, Deutsch warned the group. As always, please do not share this with the media. The longer we can fly under the radar, the better. The message was one in a trove of emails obtained by Mother Jones between Deutsch and representatives of a network of activists and organizations at the forefront of the anti-trans movement. They show the degree to which these activists shaped Deutsch's repressive legislation, a version of which was signed into law in February, and the tactics, alliances, and goals of a movement that has sought to foist their agenda on a national scale. In messages back and forth, some members of the group pushed Deutsch to make the bill even more restrictive. Bernadette Broyles, the president of general counsel of a Georgia-based law firm called the Child and Parental Rights Campaign, urged him to raise the age threshold to 18. Broyles, who is also affiliated with the conservative Christian legal powerhouse Alliance Defending Freedom, warned that other religious rights groups might not support the bill if you start by giving away 16 and 17-year-olds right from the outset. Others included Andre Van Mol, a member of a fringe conservative doctors group that calls itself the American College of Pediatricians, raised concerns that the bill as written might backfire by accidentally blocking healthcare providers from attempting to change a child's perception of their sex. You heard it there. Oh no, we can't do conversion therapy. That's bad. Let's change it so that we can. At the time, there was little precedent for such bills, and Deutsch's legislation, called the Vulnerable Child Protection Act, was killed in the Senate after doctors showed up at the South Dakota State House to argue they should not be sent to prison for following medical consensus. Though our session in SD is now over, and our efforts to protect gender-confused vulnerable children failed, I continued to receive ugly emails and social media posts, Deutsch said, and he complained to the group in March of 2020 about that. Yeah, of course you did. It's almost like if you aim a gun at somebody and you fail to kill them with the gun, and you just start going, well, I didn't successfully kill you. I didn't successfully pull the trigger and blow your brains out, so I don't know what the fucking problem is. It's almost like it doesn't matter. You aimed the gun. You tried the thing. You pulled the trigger. The fact that you failed doesn't make you any less of a person who attempted that. And if you think the allegory is going too far, well, just look at the suicide rates of trans people in the United States, and you tell me if the allegory is going too far. Sapphire Yagi says, what is conversion therapy? Okay, so, conversion therapy is the act of trying to take somebody who is LGBTQ, of some variety, and making them straight and cis. That's what it is. If somebody's trans, it's trying to force them to be cis. If somebody's gay, it's trying to force them to be straight. That's the goal of conversion therapy. It's to try to realign a person into the straight and narrow, the Christian purity culture's idea of the ideal person. It's a therapy session that doesn't work and is largely based on severe psychological and physical torture methods, and has largely been banned in various states in the U.S. for good reasons. So, said conversion therapy should be illegal in international law. Yeah, no, it's almost like places that practice conversion therapy should maybe possibly have protesters outside them 24/7, like abortion clinics do. Just saying. Please do not say that the South Dakota effort failed, Margaret Clark, general counsel for the Alabama branch of the Phyllis Schlafly-funded Eagle Forum, replied. You successfully inspired, encouraged, and counseled numerous VCAP efforts around the country. You established the ideal witness list that we are all still following in our individual states, and most importantly, you connected us all to each other. This is just the beginning. Of course it is, because there's so many of these bills that are being brought out right now. I've gone over it, but we've had over 150 bills, and we haven't even had 90 days in the year so far. Indeed, Deutsch's bill has proven influential in the recent surge of anti-LGBTQ lawmaking. This legislative session, at least 18 states have considered bills containing language closely resembling the text of the Vulnerable Child Protection Act. The leaked emails reveal how Deutsch's proposal helped proponents of the national movement to restrict gender-affirming care and established a playbook for their now common tactics. They've very much increased sophistication since then, but the roots are there, says activist and writer Erin Reed, who tracks anti-trans legislation. Reed said that when she met with legislators, they're often surprised to learn of the outside forces pushing anti-trans bills. This isn't coming from an in-state grassroots support system, she says. The emails demonstrate close collaboration between groups working behind the scenes to push bills banning transgender healthcare, including ADF, which has defended state-sanctioned sterilization of trans people in Europe, and the ACPEDS, which has opposed adoption by gay couples and supported conversion therapy for LGBTQ youth. In recent years, ADF has drafted legislation banning trans children from using school restrooms or playing on school sports teams that align with their gender identity. Both groups are also staunchly anti-abortion. ADF, which drafted the Mississippi abortion ban at the heart of the case that overturned Roe v. Wade, is currently representing ACPEDS in a closely watched lawsuit to ban an abortion pill, mifepristone, nationally. There are groups who we know are not interested in the best practice care for trans kids, said Catherine Oakley, state legislative director and senior counsel for the Human Rights Campaign. These bills are coming from national organizations whose purpose it is to harm LGBTQ people. More than half of transgender and non-binary kids have considered suicide, according to a 2021 survey by the Trevor Project, and 93% say that they worry about state laws denying transgender people access to gender-affirming medical care. The treatment approach, which typically includes puberty blockers for pubescent children, cross-sex hormones for teenagers or adults, are almost exclusively for adults, surgeries, represents a broad medical agreement that such care can be crucial for supporting trans kids' well-being. Gender-affirming care is supported by the American Medical Association, American Academy of Pediatrics, American Psychiatric Association, and the Endocrine Society, and other major medical organizations. Studies have found that it is associated with better mental health outcomes over both short and long-term periods. The organization's exchanging emails with Deutsch and his other collaborators aren't shy about their agenda. Several, including ASPEDS, Eagle Forum, and the Christian Medical and Dental Association, are listed as partners in a campaign dubbed the Promise to America's Children, co-led by ADF, the Heritage Foundation, a major conservative think tank and also represented in the emails, and the Christian nationalist lobbying group Family Policy Alliance. The campaign pushes anti-LGBTQ legislation, claiming that the government and media are imposing explicit sexual content on children, meaning information about the sexual orientation, gender identity, and abortion. The president of the American Principles Project, a member of the coalition, recently told the New York Times that his group's goal was to eliminate all transition care, starting with children, because that's where the consensus is. All transition care. All of it. Every last bit. It doesn't stop with kids. It starts with kids because those are the people that they can most easily convince random Joes on the street need to be protected. Lawmakers often seek advice from experts in law, policy, medicine, and other fields as they craft legislation, ADF Senior Vice President of Communications Greg Scott said in a statement. That's a normal part of a healthy democracy. Privately, John Uhler, a therapist who supports conversion therapy, urged the working group to respond to questions for this article by emphasizing that there is no such thing as a trans kid. He later sent me a series of social media posts comparing trans people and drag performers to sexual predators. The emails illustrate just how long some major figures in the anti-trans movement have been incubating political attacks on transgender healthcare. For instance, Broyles, who today represented Jamie Reed, the former caseworker who has made controversial high-profile claims against a Missouri gender clinic, who was working in 2020 with ACPEDS. We're just going to say ACPEDS. ACPEDS Executive Director Michelle Cretella and retired American Principles Project Senior Fellow Jane Robbins to compile a packet of lobbying materials in support of Vulnerable Child Protection Act bills, including a guide targeted at parents. It says, "Please share these with your legislators and feel free to disseminate them as widely as possible with allies," Broyles wrote on January 9th, 2020. "We hope they become weapons in the hands of many warriors." The language here. The 2019 bill wasn't Deutsch's first time pushing anti-trans legislation or his first time working with ADF. A retired chiropractor and former president of the anti-abortion group South Dakota Right to Life, Deutsch was elected to the state house in 2014 and 2 years later introduced one of the earliest bathroom bills, based on ADF model legislation like North Carolina's infamous HB 2. The proposal attempted to block trans students from using school restrooms and locker rooms that match their gender identity. It passed both houses of the state legislature before it was vetoed by the then governor Dennis Daggard, who said that the bill does not address any pressure issue concerning the schools districts of South Dakota. According to the University of Cincinnati law professor Ryan Thorson, a former LGBT rights program researcher for Human Rights Watch, Deutsch was one of the most prominent state lawmakers nationally in pushing anti-transgender restrictions on the state level, even before we were seeing these huge waves of bills. In 2019, Deutsch tweeted that he would try to criminalize doctors who followed the Endocrine Society's clinical practice guidelines for treating people with gender dysphoria. He would later claim the idea for such a law had came from children I saw on Twitter. Oh, so sad. And not from the lobbying groups that are literally paying your fucking bills. These people told him to read Reddit forums about detransitioning. By that summer, Deutsch had quietly assembled a group of advisors, including people who had once identified as trans, only to reverse course and deny that anyone is truly transgender. They helped him workshop legislative language, supporting materials, and proponent testimony. Just a note to update you on the status of the Vulnerable Child Protection Act. I'm comfortable the bill and white paper are on the near final form. I have no doubt this will be an uphill battle when we get to session. As always, please don't share this with the media. Please let me know if you have questions. I'm grateful for your support and prayers. It was like Deutsch assembled a team of Navy SEALs. We were all trained killers in a speciality, said Elisa Ray Shoup, a retired U.S. Army soldier who became a vocal anti-trans advocate and participated in Deutsch's working group after detransitioning. Shoup has since retransitioned, disavowed much of her old activism, and shared her copies of the working group's emails with reporters. Religious rights rhetoric about wanting to help children with gender dysphoria is just a front for what they do behind the scenes. It's like they want to do as much damage to the trans community as they can. How many times do I have to keep saying it? The cruelty is the point. The cruelty is the point. The cruelty is the point. The draft bill Deutsch sent to the group in August 2019 sparked a lengthy debate over language. In one email chain, participants struggled to narrow the wording of Deutsch's bill to avoid blocking treatments for trauma victims or legitimizing the concept of gender as one separate from biological sex. Catherine Cave, a founder of the anti-trans parent organization Kesley Coalition, suggested specifying that treatments were only banned for patients who had an incorrect perception of their sex. A child and parental rights campaign lawyer proposed replacing the word incorrect with dissonant. Richard Mast of Liberty Counsel separately advised the group to avoid saying the words transgender, cisgender, or non-binary. Using them surrenders the language. It's the other side's language. It frames the debate. If we use it, we lose. Members of the South Dakota team, as they are occasionally referred to, hammered out talking points for upcoming bill hearings, where a detransitioner and a member of the Women's Liberation Front would testify in favor of the bill, along with doctors from both inside and outside South Dakota. The group debated how to respond to the ACLU's claim that their bill was unconstitutional. While there may be a constitutional right to refuse to carry a child to term under Roe, there is no constitutional right to chemically and surgically mutilating one's healthy body, where there is no disease to be treated. That is child abuse, Broyles wrote. As they brainstormed responses to the argument that gender-affirming care reduces suicide, an assertion that is backed up by research, peer-reviewed studies that have been repeatedly found that trans and non-binary youth with access to gender-affirming care are significantly less likely to consider suicide than those who did not receive such care, a larger analysis using online survey data from over 11,000 trans and non-binary youth found that using gender-affirming hormonal therapy was associated with lower rates of both depression and suicidality. Yet, one team member called the argument that gender-affirming care reduces suicide abusive. Another argued it was a way for doctors to coerce patients to consent to gender-affirming care for their child. No, the fuck it's not. Van Mol, the doctor, suggested Deutsch repeatedly to the suicide prevention argument with a rebuttal published on a defunct anti-trans blog. Why weren't the 1950s a total bloodbath for suicide if non-affirmation of everything is the fast train to offing oneself? Because sometimes people who have suicide ideation don't commit suicide. That's the counter to that fucking counter. It's not a difficult one. Another doctor in the working group, California endocrinologist Michael Lindlaw, had gained attention for his writing against gender-affirming care after parents at a charter school in his region raised complaints that they hadn't been notified before kindergartners were read a children's book, I Am Jazz, about trans teenager Jazz Jennings. Last fall, when the state of Florida called on Laidlaw as an expert witness in a lawsuit over its anti-trans Medicaid policy, a federal judge concluded that he was far off from the accepted view on how to treat gender dysphoria, in part because Laidlaw had said he would refuse to use patients' preferred pronouns. In his South Dakota testimony, Laidlaw compared gender-affirming care to the Nazi experimentation and the Tuskegee syphilis study. In emails to Deutsch and the group, he railed against doctors who prescribe puberty blockers, which are used to delay unwanted physical changes of gender-diverse kids and give them more time to explore whether or not they need to transition. He said it was willfully harming children, even if kids had their parents' consent to treatment. The physician is the criminal in these scenarios and must be prosecuted by law. What the flying fuck? And you have to ask yourself when we're going through all of this, why? Because they know it's a thing that can get them votes and get them money and get them funding. Trans kids are easy targets. It's very hard for kids to advocate for themselves. Trans adults are easy targets because there's just not that many of them. Yeah, there's 1.6 million trans adults, but most people look at a trans person and think they're a freak. That's what a lot of people think of when they think of a trans person. They may accept that they're a real person, and they may accept that they're people that they may or may not care about, but by and large, there are lots of people who look at trans people and don't think that they are normal. And that's what groups like this are going after. They are looking at those people, and they are saying, yes, you're right, and we have a way forward for you. Give us money and give us votes, and we can solve your problem with these people that make you so uncomfortable. As opposed to doing what you're supposed to do and going, no, trans people are not freaks. They're no different than any other person in the fucking world. They are people that have a different lived experience than you, but they're still people. They are your friends. They are your family. They are the people around you that are hiding in the closet because they don't want to deal with you calling them slurs. They don't want to deal with you increasing their suicidality. That's what they don't want to deal with. But instead, groups like this tell you, no, being cruel to trans people is a good thing, actually. Being cruel to trans people is the right thing to do, because if you treat the trans people like they are people who should be ostracized by society, then maybe the pressure will eventually make them change. Is any of this sounding familiar? Have any of you experienced this, maybe? Because I guarantee you, people in my audience, people who aren't even in my audience, have had the experience of people who, the minute that they find out that you are trans, they treat you differently. Sometimes it's overt. Sometimes they use words. I'm not going to go into the list because, of course, there's many of them that are used that are cruel. But they'll use disparaging words on you. There are other ones that will say subtle things that seem like they're supportive but are really not. Oh, don't get that hair surgery. Don't get that laser hair removal. You could just shave, and, you know, if you ever want the hair again, then you could just get it, you have it then again. It's permanent if you do it the other way around. That's just not great, isn't it? I know that one. I know that one, because I did that one. I know that one very well. Because me personally, I did that to a friend of mine who came out to me in confidence. That's how I treated them. Because I didn't know any better. I was a more cruel, more stupid, and honestly, just not a great person. I know the language that got used, the language that seems supportive and tries not to be cruel, because I used the cruel language once before. Later on in life, I used the supportive language that seemed less cruel, in a vain attempt to support, when really all I was doing was trying to slowly convince somebody not to be trans. Not to be who they legitimately were. Not support them on their journey, but use language that made it sound like I was. The cruelty is the point for the organizations that push all of this. So I've been lucky enough to have an accepting family. It's other people, and even sometimes my family says some things. Yeah. There's one trans streamer on Twitch I follow that her mother said, you should grow out your beard. that I was pushing in a part of my vent because the vent is located directly under my actual chair. We'll continue on with the article, but I point all of that out because maybe it's something you've done. Maybe somebody who's trans has come out to you and you've been supportive, but the way you've been supportive has been very... Maybe you won't find yourself being the person that you tell me you truly honestly are. Maybe you won't. I mean, I'll be here for you while you're here, but maybe that's not where you'll land. You never know. You never know. Been there. Done that. Don't. Gigi, I love you very much. But please. Unstable Ghost, thank you for redeeming your points for an hada. Maybe not the best time to do it, but you did it. That makes you a degenerate. But let's go ahead and continue. Around the same time it became clear that Deutsch's bill would not pass, the discussions on the email threads shifted from strategy to impassioned proclamations that trans people didn't exist. The state forcing people to... The state is forcing people to participate in a lie akin to 2 + 2 = 5, Rotella wrote. A man is not a woman! If this is not the definition of insane, I don't know what it is! Some participants in the chains argued over whether it undermined their cause to work with trans activists who opposed medical transition for children but not adults. Their endorsements come with a hitch. They expect everyone to play make-believe, and then that they really are the opposite sex and have compelled pronouns and all that garbage. In spring of 2020, the group claimed one victory. Mast of Liberty Council put the team in touch with Idaho Representative Julian Young, who was working on a bill to prohibit trans people from changing the gender marker on their birth certificate. Young, who had taken edits from the ADF attorney Matt Sharp on the proposal, asked the group for feedback on the language and invited them to edit her press release about it. On March 30th, 2020, Young wrote to the group with excitement to announce that her bill had been signed by Idaho Governor Little. He said, "I can't thank you enough for your help and support. Thanks for staying so focused on this even through the endless pandemic pandemonium," replied Gary McCleb, a lawyer in ADF's appellate team. "Very, very well done." Even as Deutsch's original bill failed, variations of the Vulnerable Child Protection Act already were being introduced in at least 9 states beyond South Dakota. In part, this was thanks to efforts of people on the team who were pushing the bills they'd workshopped with Deutsch behind the scenes to other Republican legislatures. In October 2019, Broyles announced to the group that she and Robbins had met with Georgia State Representative Ginny Earhart and converted her to their cause. "She is filling our bill this legislative session," Broyles wrote. "Am stoked for what God is doing in Georgia." Not long after their meeting, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution reported Earhart as saying that she had drafted the bill in response to a high-profile child custody dispute in Texas in which parents disagreed about their child's gender identity. Tame, truth is arising in Georgia. Representative Earhart, with whom Jane Robbins and I met a couple weeks ago, released this press statement today. She is filling our bill this legislative session in Georgia. She's a fantastic God choice to carry this bill forward, and she is working with Fred, too. Am stoked for what God is doing in Georgia. She, including a stall to the trans activist agenda in Pickens County, and intercessors are praying. Blessings to all. In Florida, an aide to Representative Anthony Sabatini contacted Mast for recommendation for experts who would speak out in support of a Vulnerable Child Protection Act there. Cretella helped collect names of like-minded doctors and psychologists, reporting to the group that she'd urged lobbyists to get a diversity of witnesses, as was achieved for South Dakota. Meanwhile, Eagle Forum worked with Utah lawmaker, then Representative Brad Daw, who'd agreed to sponsor a similar bill in the state. "We've got lots of legislators working on this," a Utah Eagle Forum activist said at the Salt Lake Tribune. Deutsch told his group that he would pass workshopped legislative language and support materials to Daw through Eagle Forum, but Daw cited pushback from colleagues and the parents of trans children, and later changed his mind and instead filed a bill to study the effects of puberty blockers. In Alabama... Hold on a second, In Alabama, according to an email from Eagle Forum's Clark, both Cretella and Deutsch had coached her as she led legislatures in the state to adopt a bill similar to Representative Fred Deutsch's. The resulting legislation, dubbed the Vulnerable Child Compassion and Protection Act, failed in 2020 and the following year, but an updated version was signed into law in 2022, becoming the country's second ban on gender-affirming care and the first to criminalize doctors who provided it. After Alabama enacted its version of Deutsch's bill, the Justice Department sued the state, arguing that the law is unconstitutional because it discriminates based on sex and transgender status. A federal judge agreed to block parts of the new law, explaining that Alabama had produced no credible evidence to back up the claim that the medications are experimental. The uncontradicted evidence is that at least 22 major medical associations in the United States endorse transition medications as well-established evidence-based treatments for gender dysphoria in minors, District Judge Lyles Burke wrote in his order issuing temporary injunction. Also, Freedom Inc., thank you for redeeming your points for an owl. That said, that case, along with a challenge to the Arkansas ban, is still playing out in court. Last fall, Burke denied a Justice Department attempt to subpoena the Eagle Forum for all documents related to its advocacy for the law. Eagle Forum of Alabama took on this issue after hearing from citizens in Alabama, including parents, doctors, lawyers, and guidance counselors. This was about concerns for otherwise healthy children who will want to transition to the opposite sex, the group claimed in a press release. And in South Dakota, Deutsch finally won the long battle this February, with Governor Kristi Noem signing an updated version of the bill. The new law strips licenses from doctors who provide minors with gender-affirming care and requires healthcare providers to gradually cut off puberty blockers and hormones for any kid that they're already treating. The provision is expected to force some South Dakota teens to medically detransition by the end of 2023. Deutsch returned to Twitter February to celebrate the signing of the South Dakota ban. He said, "This concludes the efforts I began 3 years ago. Many good people have worked to protect our children." Yeah, this should be illegal. And I just want to say that state legislatures, all of their addresses are public knowledge and public information. So if you would like to send them a copious amount of mail communicating exactly how this type of shit makes you feel about them, that's probably a good thing to do. Eventually, they're going to have to answer some of it. Remember, these people are hired. They're voted in, but functionally hired to represent you. That is their job. You have the ability to communicate with them. Their homes are public knowledge. Their offices are largely public knowledge. You can organize protests in front of locations where they will be. You can make your voice heard. Don't resort to things like violence. That gets you put in jail. And largely, I can't condone it. But protest. Large swaths of protests. These are things that are part of American tradition. And we should probably be exercising them more often. Just saying. Just saying. But this shit is horrendous. But it does show that if we ever say that, by the way, there's a cabal of people who are actually trying to hurt trans people in the United States, specifically, we have evidence of that. There are groups that are literally making it their entire job and purpose to harm trans people. And it's gross, and it's disgusting, and it's painful to think about, because if you've got anybody in your life who is trans, who means a lot to you, then it's probably very hard to not envision them when you're going over this data. And yet, it is still happening. If ever somebody tries to tell you that there is not an attempt to genocide trans people in the United States, I have done a video going over literally all of the steps of genocide and exactly which areas we have dabbled in and which areas we have long since sailed past. That's a video that I did a while ago. It's certainly a video that you can definitely reference when talking about this with people now. And just so you know, if somebody decides that they want to make fun of you for watching a big boobied cat girl on the internet, and that's the way they're going to dismiss any criticism that is levied in that video or otherwise, then let them know that that's a really stupid way to dismiss somebody. Looks, presentation, none of that says anything about intent. None of that says anything about merits of an argument. If a potato said the sky is blue, would you say the potato's lying because potatoes aren't supposed to talk? But with that said, let me know what you think in the comments section below. Hit the like button if you haven't already, subscribe if you haven't already, and stay safe out there. Insert end video tagline here.